They say weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of a woman's life. But for me, the sound I remember most wasn't the music or the laughter. It was the crash, the sharp shatter of a crystal vase meeting marble, and with it, the silent crumbling of something inside me. My daughter's voice didn't tremble when she screamed it. "You ruined my wedding. You ruined everything. You ruined my life. Shut up and get out of my wedding right now." Her face was radiant, not with joy, but with rage. And just like that, the moment shifted. If you've ever been hurt by family in front of others, drop a 5 so she knows she's not alone. Before we start, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Try to watch the videos as long as possible. By watching more often, YouTube will promote these stories to a larger audience, grow your channel, and bring you more interesting things. Let's start now. "I hope she doesn't," I replied. Calm and unwavering, maybe then she'll finally feel something that isn't entitlement. He leaned back. "Would you like to make any changes to your estate plan while we're here soon?" I said, one step at a time on my way out. I passed a flower shop. I stood in front of the window for a long time, staring at a vase that looked almost identical to the one I had broken at the wedding. This one was deep blue, smooth around the edges, placed next to a note that read, "Fragile, handle with care." I thought about buying it, about putting it on my future kitchen table, wherever that might be. But I didn't. Instead, I walked away with a thought I had never let myself believe before. If she saw me as disposable, then she never deserved the part of me I gave. It was barely a week after I signed the papers with Cameron when my phone rang, let it go to voicemail, then another. This time, Melissa's name flashed on the screen. Melissa in all caps, just like the way she used to text me demands. I stared at it for a moment, then let it ring 30 minutes later. It rang again. I picked up. "What did you do?" Her voice was shrill, panicked. I could hear the clatter of heels, the echo of an empty room like she was pacing. "Why are my cards not working? I just got a notification that the entire account is frozen." "What the hell is going on?" I said nothing at first, just listened. "I went to the bank." She went on, breathing heavy, and they said, "I'm responsible for $51,000. They said the credit line is no longer valid, and I can't access anything. What did you do?" I waited for the silence. It came short and sharp. Then I said, "You told me I ruined your life." "What?" she snapped. "So, let the bank fix it," I finished quietly. "You can't just do this," she screamed. "You can't just disappear and pull the plug on everything I have bills. I have payments. I have a wedding loan still active." I heard her breath stutter like she had just realized the whole financial web she'd spun was coming undone. The girl who once wore matching silk pajamas and boasted about living like a queen was now at the mercy of interest rates and payment deadlines. "You had no right," she hissed. "No right to freeze it. That was our agreement." "There was no agreement." I interrupted. My voice was calm. "Even, there were only withdrawals, and I finally stopped authorizing them. You're my mother, and you're the one who said I was no longer family." "Dead." Silence. I pictured her standing at the counter of that cold, sterile bank, makeup smudged, confusion turning to rage, the financial floor cracking beneath her expensive heels. For once, I didn't feel guilt. I felt gravity. She had floated through life on invisible support, convinced she was walking on clouds. It was time. She realized that cloud was me. "You used my name," I said. "You used my credit. You used my money. You used my memories and burned them in the trash. Now it's your turn to use something else, your own 2 feet." I ended the call. There were no follow-ups that day. But the next morning, I got a voicemail. Her voice was small, not angry, just frightened. "Mom." I didn't know it was like that. I didn't know how much I owed. They said I need to pay within 30 days, or they'll take legal action. Can you just talk to me? Please. I listened. I let the voicemail finish, then I deleted it. Sometimes, love is a warm blanket, a home-cooked meal, a quiet understanding, and sometimes it is a locked door for 30 years. I had been a revolving door for her moods, her tantrums, her shopping sprees, and her silences. I let her walk in and out as she pleased, thinking that motherhood meant never setting boundaries. But I was done being the doormat at the wedding. She never thanked me, for she had slapped me in front of 200 people and said I ruined her life. Let the bank teach her what real ruin feels like. I moved into Emily's apartment in Queens just before the first frost of October. The leaves on the trees were the color of copper pennies and the windows steamed from the kettle. She always seemed to have boiling. It smelled like cinnamon and dried lavender and something else. I hadn't felt in a long time peace. Emily had insisted after everything that happened. She drove herself all the way down from New York to get me, not a word of pity, not a trace of judgment. Just Aunt Linda, you should never live in a house where you feel like an inconvenience. Her building was small, but filled with light. Her neighbors knew her name at night. I could hear the sound of jazz coming from the apartment upstairs. Somehow, even the city's noise felt comforting. She cleared out the spare room for me, painted it in soft blues, hung a little sign over the bed that read, "You belong." I cried when I saw it, not because it was fancy, but because no one had made me feel like I belonged in a very long time. Emily worked long shifts at the hospital, but she always came home smiling, always asked how my day was. We had a little ritual. Tea at 8 p.m., no matter what. She'd sit cross-legged on the couch in her scrubs, and I'd wrap my shawl around my shoulders and pour for both of us. That first week I was quiet, still stiff from everything that happened, still hearing Melissa's words in my head, over and over again, like the crack of that broken vase. But Emily, she made room for my silence. She let me be quiet without making me feel invisible one evening while we were having tea. She asked softly, "What was your favorite memory of being young?" I blinked. No one had asked me about me in years, not about my aches or errands or bills, but about who I used to be. I told her about a boy named Michael who used to pass me notes during algebra, about the time I skipped school and danced barefoot in the rain, about the turquoise dress I saved for 6 months to buy and only wore once to a roller rink on my birthday. She laughed, wide-eyed. "Damn, Aunt Linda, you were wild." And just like that, I laughed too, really laughed. My whole chest shook. I had to put my teacup down because I was afraid I'd drop it. Emily laughed with me, until we were both in tears. That was the moment it happened. The thawing. It was not dramatic, not cinematic, just tea and laughter and 2 women. One who'd lived too long in the shadows, and one who kept the light on later that week. Emily helped me start a little herb garden on the fire escape. I planted basil, rosemary, and a stubborn lavender that refused to sprout. She teased me that I talked to the pots more than to her. I began knitting again, reading. I found myself waking up before the alarm, excited to stretch dough or brew coffee, just because it felt like living again. I wasn't in a mansion. I wasn't needed for mortgage payments or babysitting or emergency loans. I wasn't a placeholder or a prop in someone else's perfect life. I was Linda, and that was enough. The call came late on a Thursday night. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter after baking Emily's favorite lemon bars, when the phone rang. The name, flashing on the screen, stopped me cold. Melissa hadn't heard her voice in weeks, not since the bank notices had started piling up at her door. Not since the credit card companies had begun circling like hawks. I hesitated, just for a second, then answered Mom. Her voice was cracked hoarse, like she'd been crying for hours. "Mom, I don't know what to do. They're saying I owe over $50,000. They froze everything. I can't even buy groceries." "I didn't know the debt was in your name. You never told me." I stood still. My fingers curled around the edge of the counter. I could almost see her on the other end, mascara smudged, pacing the kitchen floor of a house I had helped pay for. "I need your help," she continued. "Please, just call the bank and explain. Just remove your name like before. You always fix things. Please, Mom. Please." There was a pause. "You're my mother. You have to help me." I leaned back against the kitchen wall, closed my eyes, and exhaled. "No, Melissa," I said softly. "I do not." She went quiet, then a whimper, followed by rage. "What do you mean? No. You're just going to leave me in this mess. You can't do that. I'm your daughter." I felt a strange stillness inside me. Not anger, not revenge, just calm. "I taught you love, Melissa," I said gently. "I gave you everything I could. But now," I opened the drawer and pulled out the last letter from the bank with her name printed next to mine. "Now I'll let the bank teach you consequence." She started sobbing, loud, wet, desperate sobs that once would have broken me, but not anymore. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I didn't mean what I said at the wedding. I was stressed. I was scared." "You always know how to handle things. Please, Mom, please forgive me." I closed my eyes again, let the silence settle between us like dust. "I do forgive you," I said, "but forgiveness doesn't mean I have to fix what you broke." More crying, I whispered. "Please, I hope one day," I added quietly, "you look back and understand that this wasn't punishment. It was the only way I could teach you to stand on your own. Goodbye, Melissa." And I hung up. My hand didn't shake. My voice hadn't risen. There was no bitterness in my chest, just clarity. I set the phone down and turned back to my lemon bars. The scent of citrus still lingered in the air. Emily was due home any minute. She'd walk in tired from her shift, ask me how my day was, and listen when I answered. She wouldn't yell. She wouldn't ask for money. She wouldn't tear up my photos. She'd just sit across from me, sip her tea, and talk to me like I mattered for the first time in a long, long while. I wasn't someone's emergency fund, someone's scapegoat, or someone's silent support beam. I was just a woman who had finally drawn the line between love and being used. And I wasn't crossing it again. I never thought I would stand at a podium again. Not at this age, not with these knees. But there I was, one Friday afternoon in the basement of the Ridgewood Public Library, surrounded by folding chairs and the hum of a too-old air conditioner. The room was filled mostly with women. Many wore cardigans, even in the spring warmth, their hands folded on their laps or wrapped around paper cups of weak coffee. Some sat next to daughters, most did not. The sign behind me read, "Elder Voices, Real Stories of Resilience." I adjusted the microphone. My voice came out softer than I expected, but clear. "My name is Linda," I began, "and I used to believe that being a mother meant a hush fell." They leaned in, not with pity, but with recognition. I told them everything. How I had left the assisted living home to help my daughter. How I paid 6 months of her mortgage from my own savings. How I lived in her house, cooked her meals, folded her laundry, and how on the most expensive day of her life, dressed in white lace and diamonds, she slapped me to the ground and told me I ruined everything I watched as women dabbed at their eyes with tissues. One woman let her coffee go cold in her lap. Another reached for the hand of the lady beside her. I told them about the torn photographs, about standing in the driveway, watching my own wedding picture drift in the wind like trash, about the silence that followed me around that house, the way I learned to walk quieter, ask for less, make myself smaller. Then I told them about the accounts, the debt, the law firm, and the moment I said enough. I did not say it with rage. I did not say it with revenge. I said it with a quiet that echoed more loudly than any scream I could have mustered. I froze her credit cards. I said simply. I stopped shielding her from herself, and I left. There was a beat of silence. Then, as if on cue, someone in the back whispered, "Good a few." Women clapped quietly at first, then others joined, some nodded, some smiled through tears. No one asked me to apologize. One woman in a lavender blouse raised her hand. "How did you know it was time to leave?" I looked at her. Her eyes were full of something I knew too well, guilt the kind women carry like a second spine. I did not know. I said honestly, I just knew I couldn't keep staying there. Were no follow-up questions. No lectures, just a silence full of understanding. I ended with one final sentence. It was not rehearsed. It just came. "Forgiveness is optional," I said, my voice steady. "Dignity is not." They wrote it down, every word. I saw. It scribbled into notebooks, tapped into phones, whispered to one another. As they left, some of them came up to me afterward, clutching my hands like lifelines. One woman hugged me tightly and said, "You gave me the courage to finally move out of my son's basement." Another whispered, "I thought it was just me. It was never just us." That was the lie. I walked out of the library into the late afternoon sun, and there they were, Emily, waiting by the fountain with her daughter Ava, my great niece. But the closest thing I had now to a grandchild. Ava ran to me, squealing arms flung wide. I scooped her up and kissed the top of her curly head. Emily raised her phone. "Smile, Aunt Linda," she said. And I did not. The polite smile, not the brave smile I used to wear, like armor. This one came from somewhere deeper, somewhere I had thought long buried beneath guilt and silence and broken glass. We stood together, 3 generations, the library behind us and the whole rest of the evening ahead. As the camera clicked, I thought about the photos that had been torn apart, burned, erased, and I thought they burned my photos. But they never burned my worth. I am not a bank account. I am not a burden. I am not a ghost in someone else's house. I am Linda, and I am finally home. She was slapped in public, humiliated at her own daughter's wedding. Her photos were torn, her worth denied, and her silence mistaken for weakness. But Linda didn't scream. She didn't beg. She chose dignity. And in the end, when her daughter cried for help, Linda gave her the only answer left. "I taught you. Love now. I'll let the bank teach you consequence." This is not just a story about money or even betrayal. It's about every woman who gave too much, every mother who stayed quiet, every grandmother who was told she no longer mattered. They burned her memories, but they couldn't burn her value because self-worth is not written in thank you notes or family titles. It's written in how you rise when the world says, "Sit down." Linda's story, like so many others we share on this channel, is a reminder that forgiveness is a choice. But dignity is a right at Grandma True Stories. We believe that silence should not be the end of anyone's story. Not after everything they've survived. Not after everything they've given. If this story moved you, if you saw your own mother, your grandmother, or even yourself in Linda's voice, then don't let her story disappear into the algorithm. Click subscribe. Hit the bell Share this with someone who needs to remember. They still matter. Because here we don't just tell stories. We give the mic back to the people who were told to stay quiet. And we say, loud and clear, revenge has no expiration date. Neither does your worth. This is Grandma. True stories where the forgotten finally speak.